So we just really kind of made fun of ourselves saying that we are going to do a podcast, the podcast, and here we are with
Here it is.
episode 3. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And I want us to hit some of the things that I forgot that I really wanted us to hit in the last thing. One of those being specifically honoring our parents. So when we divided up the 10 Commandments, the first 4 were about how we love the Lord. Second half, those last 6 were about how we love others. And I spent a lot of time last Sunday talking about how that was the place to start because of that honoring and authority and the position that God has placed us in our families to help us learn how to relate to other people and to love other people well. I think one of the questions that I got is not should we honor our parents? That's clearly spelled out, right?
Right.
But how do we honor parents when there are situations or parts of life that were not honorable?
Right.
And how they handled family, and even maybe presently.
Right.
Like it might not even be like things in the past. It could be that they're not doing honorable things right now. So how do people honor their parents in that? So how would you start that discussion?
Well, and you know, I had a little bit of a different angle on Sunday morning just because I gave a charge to parents. Like number one, I think the honor your father and mother, I'm not sure which category that goes in. You know, we talked about one category is how to love God well, and then the other is how to love others well. And so like literally your parents are others. I mean, they're not God.
Right.
But they sort of are an extension of God's grace in your life.
Yeah, they're like a bridge. Hey, it's a bridge.
Well, I do think it's kind of it's a flip for the 10 Commandments. And so one of the charges I gave to parents is like, look, it doesn't say love your father and mother. It says honor your father and mother.
Right.
And a lot of times, at least my millennial generation, we're very concerned that our kids love us, but we're less concerned that our kids honor us. And it's our duty as parents to teach them. And one of the things we talked about Sunday is even in the New Testament it says honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with the promise that it will go well with you and that you will have long days in the earth. So if you want to be a good parent and you want it to go well with your children and you want them to live a long time, like you're called to teach them to honor you. And as self-serving as that can feel just because of our cultural baggage, like that's what you need to do for your kids.
Yeah.
And then I said you make it easier for your kids to honor you
when you're honorable.
If you're honorable.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing that I think needs to be on our heart.
I think before you go into the next thing, one of the ways that I phrased it was that parents are the first expression of God to their children.
Right.
And so if that is the case, and guess what? It is, then how are we expressing the character of God to our children? And it goes along the same way. Like, are we doing things in such an honorable way that we make it easy for our kids to honor us because we have modeled well the character and expression of God to our children?
Absolutely.
But that's not the question.
The reality is, in a broken, fallen world, well, number one, like, I'm going to blow it as a parent all the time.
You like to use that word.
Well, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fail. And like with the weight of being honorable, you have to understand that that's reality.
Right.
And so the command is to honor your father and mother,
right? Not
like honor them when they deserve it, you know, all those kinds of things. And so like there's a continuum in general. So like our parents, regardless of how good our parents are, they're going to mess up. Mm-hmm. And even in the messing up, our calling and our charge is to honor them.
Right.
And so that's reality for everybody. Now, what's not reality for everybody, but is reality for some people, is some people's relationship with their parents is characterized by them not living up to what it means to be a biblical father or mother.
Right.
And so, you know, the answer is you still have to honor your parents. That doesn't mean...
Yeah, the question becomes, what does that mean to honor them?
And one of the things that I think we need to be very careful with is obedience does not equal honor, but they're related. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when you honor your parents, that will often mean being obedient to your parents.
Right.
But sometimes your parents are going to be out of step with God's will and his word.
Sure.
And so when there's a conflict there, they're meant to be an extension of grace, of God's grace in your life, but sometimes they're not.
Sometimes they're not.
And so in that scenario,
sometimes
obedience,
we're not.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obedience doesn't equal honor in that situation.
I got you.
But it does mean certain things, like the word honor is tied with financial support. And obviously we live in a different world now. You know, in the time that Exodus was written, there were no 401ks, there were no pension plans, there were no arrangements that you could make in that way. So when you were unable to provide for yourself anymore, like, who provided for you?
Right.
It was your children. And so there's also an interesting phrasing in the way that that's written in Exodus chapter 20, where it says, honor your father and your mother. And then in that same verse, it says, for your God.
Mm.
And I think there's this connection of, like, God gave you life. God provides for you.
Mm.
God is your God.
Right.
And in the same way, your parents gave you life.
Yeah.
Your parents are supposed to provide for you, be that extension. And so there's an honor and a weight that just goes with that.
Right.
And so that means that your parents are always your parents.
Right.
They're always the one that gave you life. Like, and it's funny, we had a discussion, like, I was kind of visiting with the youth on Sunday night, and I said, whether your parents, you know, are awesome or not awesome, the reason you're in this room right now tonight is because something happened by God's grace through your parents to get you right here, right now. And so the way that you honor them is to just to not speak ill of them, right? To try to protect them, to try to hold them in esteem, to try to respect them. Meanwhile, understanding that in a fallen world, sometimes that means that you're not going to be able to obey. Sometimes that means you're going to have to draw boundaries. Sometimes that means that your relationship doesn't look exactly like you wish it looked. Mm. But you can still watch how you talk about them, how you care for them, how you show them honor in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I was thinking through, excuse me, as I was talking about honoring your parents, is I was recognizing that there are people who are hearing those words in the congregation who have unbelievable pain and baggage from familial relationships as it pertains to moms and dads and histories and pasts and even presents. I mean, like, anyway, so I was just trying to figure out how to flesh out for them, you know, what it meant to honor. And I like what you said, that honor doesn't mean that we're boundaryless. Like, it doesn't mean that we don't have any boundaries. Right. I don't know if that's a word. So it doesn't mean that there are no boundaries or there's no ways that we exist in these relationships. And it doesn't mean that they have free reign on everything, you know, like that's another idea. And it also, one thing I hit in Myrtle Beach was honoring your family, your mother and father, doesn't mean you have to forget all the bad things. It doesn't mean you have to act like they don't happen. I think honoring, you can hold in your hand at the same time, honoring parents and still recognizing the not good things that have taken place.
Right.
And that's interesting, right? Like, because you can't say that honoring means you just completely dismiss it, because that happened. And I think it would be, I know it goes against the character of God to act like, to lie about something as if it didn't happen. Correct. When it did.
Yeah.
So how do you flesh out with someone that, like, let's try to go, that has really had a rough past when it comes to familiar relationships? What would be your word of advice to them now as they're trying to honor their parents?
Well, the first commandments are about honoring the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's primary, right? So you have to say, I'm going to honor the will and the command of God first.
It's like improper use, like we talked about last episode. Right. Improper place.
In the callings you have on your life, you know, like, so sometimes it will mean you have a calling to care for your family. And so sometimes that's going to affect how you interact with your parents, right? But I think the thing is, you give them the position, and this is one of the things we said Sunday morning. There's a honor that comes with the office of being father and mother. So even if it's not in the character of the person, there's an honor that comes with the office. And so we want to be careful to find every place we can to honor that office. And that might mean caring for them in their old age. That might mean just how we talk. It's not an untruthful way, right? We're not going to be untruthful. We're not going to sweep things under the rug. Sometimes even being honest is a way to honor, At the same time, I keep thinking about, and this isn't a direct correlation, but it's in my mind. In the New Testament, when Paul talks about an unbelieving spouse, how you can honor your husband and you may win them. And I feel like when you honor the position because God has called you to do that, it can be an extension and a means of grace for that parent that needs to see God.
Yeah.
And so there are these, in that situation I'm talking about, like the husband should be leading the wife, but the wife, by how she honors her husband, is able to show him the grace of God. And so I think it is tied up in that, like, God is first, your calling is maintained, but you find ways to honor the office because that's what God has called me to do.
Yeah. And I like also what you said too about even how you honor your parents might show up practically in how you lead your own family. Obviously, if you had great examples as family, you want to mimic those. But then also if you had negative examples, you decidedly say, I don't want to mimic those.
Right.
But that's not even where I'm going. I'm thinking about even decisions we have to make in our family to protect our family, potentially. Like potentially protect our family God's entrusted to you, to us, from things that that might be spilling over from honoring your parents. And I think that's really important because, like I said, honoring your parents doesn't mean it's just free reign access on everything. There are some things that some families, thankfully this is not something my family has to venture through, but there are some times where you have to make decisions to protect the family, to be the parent that is honorable to your children, that also is having to live in the consequences of past things that are still showing up today. And I think that's really important to note. And I like what you said about honoring the position. When you can't honor the person, the character, maybe the position is what you honor. And that's how you go about. I like that a lot, but positionally speaking. So,
and like, to use like an extreme example, like if you have a parent that's an alcoholic, and you're going to say, I'm not going to say, like, I have to honor you so my kids can ride in the car with you. Like, you have this duty to like protect your family.
Improper placement.
Right. And so that's where you're like, you don't have to walk around the house saying like, your grandpa's a drunk, You can protect the honor, but that doesn't mean the honor supersedes the other callings and the other things that the Lord has given you to do. At the same time, I think there is an opportunity to say, where can I find the things that I can honor? Right. So it's like, maybe your grandpa's an alcoholic and that's not what we focus on. And I'm a pretty transparent person. So like, even if my kids were to say, why can't we ride with grandpa? I mean, their grandpa's not alcoholic. I'm just for clarity, I'm just trying to give an example. But I would say this is why. Like, he makes some unwise choices, and we're here to protect you. And we love grandpa, but like, that's not something we're going to do. And let's pray for him, And I don't feel like that's dishonoring. I think that's honoring what God has called us to do.
Well, it's also being honorable, for your children to be able to honor you.
But at the same time, I would try to find ways that I can say, you know what, Grandpa really did well when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. One of the great memories I have with Grandpa is doing this. Mm-hmm. Or I'm so thankful that Grandpa made sure I was at church every Sunday. Whatever it is, but like, there's a way to honor when you can find ways to honor.
Even when they're not present.
And another reason why I want to be honest and transparent is because eventually your kids will start to notice stuff. And if you've been lying to them, or not, if you've been dishonest, we'll say it that way.
Or just trying to paint a picture that maybe was not the right picture.
Right. They're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then that calls your character and your ability to speak to your kids into question. Yeah. And so that's my primary calling. And so I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to honor that, but I'm also going to try to find ways to honor, your parents, because that's what God has called you to do.
Let's switch gears.
Okay.
Like real fast. So
I'm ready.
All right. Don't commit murder. Like we went from honoring your parents to don't commit murder. The word used in the Hebrew when his murder is unlawful killing. So like it doesn't say don't kill people. It says don't murder, don't unlawfully kill, which is further introduced in it because in the next sections that we'll see in Exodus, it talks about for, a person that kills someone on accident or, there's this accidental thing as opposed to planned or purposed. So I had a few questions this week about murder, self-defense,
You're trying to find loopholes for murder? Is that what
I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just telling you some of the questions. And I will just say, like they were saying, okay, well, if someone breaks into your house, can you protect yourself? And I'm like, yes. So they were like, well, it says don't murder. And I'm like, I know, but.
Yeah.
So this is how I parsed it out. And then you can kind of like tell me. I think first of all, the unlawful taking of a life, I think that's a really important distinction. And I think that when we're talking about this idea of murder, if someone is losing their life and you're protecting life as opposed to trying to destroy life, then I think that's kind of where the barometer switches. Like I'm not going to, if I have the choice between my family or an intruder coming into my household, guess who I'm choosing?
Right.
Choosing my family. I'm protecting their life. Again, we talked about proper place, improper place. That's my first calling. And so I think when certain measures have to be taken to preserve life or to destroy, with the intention to destroy life. And then that was kind of how I was thinking through it when they were asking me that question.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to be really precise on this specific text.
Okay.
And because I feel like there's a bigger discussion on when and when is it not appropriate in terms of like war, just war theory, if you're in law enforcement, so I will just say when we're talking about the 10 Commandments and the literal translation, never murder, that's not talking about those situations.
Right.
That's not what it's speaking to. It is an individual unlawfully taking the life of another individual. Right. And regardless of how you feel the rest of Scripture unpacks this idea, and it's the first one, it's a big deal because every human bears the image of God.
Right.
And so what is in view here is that no individual has the right to take the life of another individual. There's no time when an individual has the right to decide that person can't live anymore. And for some reason, I've got a Lord of the Rings reference in my mind. I don't know if it's in the movie, but in the book, there's this thing where you remember the little Gollum character that's kind of following him around. Yeah, and so Frodo is like, I should just kill him, and Gandalf says, if you don't have the power to give life, you shouldn't be so fast to take it.
Yeah.
And I think Tolkien, who was a strong believer in Jesus, I think was trying to give this worldview of like, humans bear the image of God. God is the one that bestows that. We don't have the right to take it. If you're operating, though, we can't say this is a blanket like humans can never take a human life under any authority, because as we continue to read in the Old Testament, God's going to send them to war.
Yeah.
And God's going to send them to do some things that, if that were the case, would be in direct violation of the 10 Commandments. So that's not what it's talking about. It's saying, I don't get to decide that person doesn't deserve to live anymore. Now, when you talk about people who are operating under different authority, so if you're in war, if you are law enforcement, or in the situation you were talking about where you legally, like not the culture, but like our civic laws have given you the right to defend yourself.
Self-defense, yeah.
Then you're not making the decision.
Right.
Like, I think you don't deserve to live anymore. So that's really speaking to the murder. It's not about, I don't think it's about premeditated or non-premeditated. Like you were talking about, like it's not about a plan or not a plan, but it's about like you don't have the authority to do that. And like authority is a big, we're talking about things being in their proper place. That, authority is the government, which God gives the power of the sword, they can put people in jail because they feel like you don't need to be out in public. You need to be in jail. If I do that, it's kidnapping because I don't have the authority to do that thing. Right. And so that's where the never murder. You don't have the right to take a life. It gives us the value that lives are sacred. They bear the image of God, and no individual has that kind of power.
Right. No individual has that power, but it depends on the proper use again. I mean, there are times when that power and authority is, I guess, granted or okay.
That's what I'm saying. Like if you're operating under a different authority, like if you're a law enforcement, you're not riding around saying I'm going to decide who's a bad guy.
Right. And then it moves us into the discussion too, like even with abortion, like when we talk about, I think one of the things that you were trying to press into was the sanctity of life. Right. The idea that life is really important because it, as you said, bears the image of God, and that we don't get to make that decision, like who's valuable, who's not valuable.
Right.
And I think that one of the questions I had too was about abortion. I mean, obviously, taking the life of an individual, that's not our decision.
Right.
And so, like, we would 100% say that, abortion in that type of way is not, that's what the Ten Commandments are trying to caution us against.
And it's kind of like, I kind of hate to go down this route, but when you hear the arguments for being pro-choice, it usually comes down to things like you're making judgments on whether they have the right to live or whether it's positive or negative that they live. So it's about economics, it's like, well, they don't have a lot of money, or maybe they have an illness, and you're playing God in a sense, like you're taking the authority that you don't have.
Yeah.
And even in the phrasing, like a right to choose, that's so directly opposed to this particular commandment, because what the commandment is saying is you don't have the right to choose who lives and dies. Like that's not yours to have.
I guess even in the verbiage, pro-choice, that choice isn't ours. Life is what's given to us.
Right.
That's hard. And I'd like to also recognize it doesn't stop there. I think the reason why, even this topic is here, abortion is here, is because people deem certain life as not valuable.
Right.
But it's not just babies. It's anybody that the culture sees as doesn't produce enough product for society can be deemed unvaluable.
Right.
And we see that even as kind of like what we were talking about earlier, honoring your father and your mother. But we see that even in elderly care, in our nation, in our world. And some cultures really truly value age and wisdom and caring for those that are aged. And then some don't.
Right.
And I think that's another important issue. Like we don't get to determine when someone is valuable or invaluable.
Right. And even going back to that idea of like the office itself, like we become so desensitized to the office of human itself means you bear the image of God.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the productivity. And that's really our cultural philosophy, right? Like America is built on pragmatism. And it really comes down to what do you produce, what do you not produce, what value do you have, what value do you not have. And that, I mean, we're going to get a real rabbit trail, but even when you get to like marriage and people are weighing like, is it a net positive, is it a net negative, like those kind of positive. Well, I mean, this is kind of the way people think about marriage, right? It's like when it becomes like more of a drain to me than life-giving, then it's time to divorce or whatever. And this is not the way God's word teaches us to be. Yeah. It teaches us that there are things that are actually sacred. And sacred doesn't mean like it happens in church on Sunday morning. There are things that God has deemed sacred with a heaviness in an office.
Intrinsically valuable, like there.
And so like, and I think it extends, like we're getting outside the scope of the commandment itself, but it certainly extends to euthanasia, you know, things like that, where you're going to say, we're going to have the right to kill someone because they're not producing or whatever. But I think it also has to do with just how we value human life.
Yeah.
And that's not directly the command, but I think the command is pointing us to a bigger truth that every human being is worthy of dignity, value, and respect because they bear the image of God.
That's one thing I talked about even in all the 10 Commandments, and how I tried to order understanding 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 was following like the inside outside rule, that it tells us not to do something, but also the positive of everything. It also encourages, so like what you're saying, don't commit murder.
Right.
But the positive is value life.
Right.
Value as you said, the office of life, the sacredness of life, the inherent value of life, because it bears the mark of God. So I like the idea that, as we started even the last episode, the 10 Commandments aren't just rules. They are expressions of the character and the goodness of God for us to live out in our lives. So,
and it's like, I think C.S. Lewis has this quote of like, every human you will ever meet is eternal. And as you start to walk through all the commandments, like, so don't kill them. Don't steal from them. Don't mess with their marriage. And that was another thing that we talked about on Sunday morning, is like, I almost feel like it backs down, and I'm not going to get into the structure thing I talked to you a little bit about.
Please don't.
But I think there's something there with like the structure that the Ten Commandments
just stop. Let's just keep going.
But it's like life is sacred.
Yeah.
And then like marriage is sacred.
Yeah.
And like, don't mess with life and don't mess with marriage,
Yeah.
because marriage, Paul says the mystery of marriage is profound, and I'm saying it refers to Christ and the church.
Yeah.
And so there's a sacredness to marriage. Like, don't mess with it. Like it's sacred.
Guess what?
We're out of time again?
And
we'll probably record another one.
No, we're stopping. We're done. But the last thing I would like to end on is the last commandment, number 10, is don't covet.
Right.
And I feel like we make a transition to all the actions to really heart issues. Like, what do we desire? What do we covet? And it really hits everything. Like, it hits all the commandments that we've talked about. Talked about proper place, having those things in proper places. What is the desire of our hearts? And ultimately, the Lord is first.
Right.
Everything else falls in that. And I think even as we talk about honoring your parents, valuing life, valuing marriage, what is the desire of our hearts? Psalm, we all know this, but delight yourself in the Lord. He will give you the desires of your heart, because that's him. He is I'll say all the time that if you want the best for your life, then what you ultimately want is Jesus, because he is the best, right? And so as we talk about all these different things, just remembering the proper place in all this is it's the Lord is Lord and there is no other, right? Which is, guess what? Number 1. You should have no one up before me, right? So, very good. All right. Thanks again. Talk to you later.
All right.
I'll probably talk to you in a few minutes, but on here. Bye.
Yeah.